Hi, my name is Jonathan Miranda. I'm an associate marriage and family therapist, and I've decided to start a journey to answer a probably impossible question to answer. How do you be, or how can you be, a good man? Now, I know that question is very flawed. What does it mean to be a man? What does it mean to be good? What does it mean to be? Implicit in the question is the idea that being is not something that is a natural, inevitable outcome of life, but that there is some intention and agency in this being, a type of person with a set of attributes that I would like to embody. I've thought about this question for a long time, and recently, as I've discovered, or as I've become a therapist and started to work with men, and I discovered narrative therapy and started to dig into some of these ideas around gender and social construction and masculinity a lot more. And still, I think I've wrestled with this question. In some ways, it feels quite easy to be a man. There are an endless amount of books out there with very clear prescriptions on what actions to take to be a truly masculine person. I think in the past, as a teenager and young adult who found himself caught in the trap of these books and YouTube gurus, I only seemed to hurt myself and those around me. And so I think in some ways it feels difficult to be a good man. One of the biggest difficulties I'm finding is that there seems to be traps everywhere. If you're a single heterosexual male who's having difficulty building a romantic partnership, you can certainly find guidebooks out there. However, if you're unaware as you read these books, you may fall into the trap of misogyny that is found in lots of these books. If you decide to step out of the mainstream ways of being a man, you may find yourself mocked and chastised by other men. And so my hope is that this journey that I've taken, or that I am taking, doesn't serve as a how-to guide. I'm not interested in providing rigid definitions or an easy step-by-step plan or even rules for what to do and what not to do as you go about life. My hope is that this inspires you to begin your own journey. Not a journey of self-discovery, but just discovery. Michael White, one of the founders of narrative therapy, once said that we work from a place of inquiry, not theory. And so for me, I thought it would be a good idea to start by asking my mentors this question and seeing what direction they point me in. So for this first interview, you will meet one of my mentors. His name is Dr. Chris Hoff. He has his PhD in MFT and he has been a practicing licensed marriage and family therapist for over 10 years. He is also the founder and executive director of California Family Institute, an organization that I work at. And while he certainly isn't perfect, he is a man that I aspire to be like in many ways. And so I hope you find this conversation meaningful.
How many questions you got?
Well, I'm probably going to freestyle a few.
Okay.
Let's see. All right. So I'll probably introduce you.
Okay.
I'll do a little introduction and introduce you. Because I don't have that memorized right now for the video. So.
No problem. No problem.
Okay, so I'm doing this interview because I've started a journey to answer this question of how to be a good man.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I have this question because for me, I'm finding it difficult to find an answer to that. So I guess maybe my first question is, do you agree with the statement that it is difficult to be a good man?
Difficult to be a good man. Difficult to answer the question, what is a good man?
Well, I guess how would you define that? Maybe how do you
Well,
define good man?
I might try not to define it actually. I was thinking about that. I was thinking about, not trying to be prescriptive in what a good man is. And
Mm,
actually, thinking about how do we not get caught in kind of that good bad thing, but also, but then how do we make space for men to, become all the possible things that they could
mm.
become, rather than being kind of prescriptive about it. I was thinking,
Yeah.
yeah.
How do you know if you are moving through the world in a way in which maybe that you feel proud of them?
Uh, well, I'm kind of grounded in very much for relational ethics. I think that's been my experience of how I know if I'm doing okay in that realm is if the people around me are okay with me in that realm, right?
Hmm.
Yeah. So I would
Okay.
kind of maybe best answer that question. I think it's a useful exercise. I just did it with my partner, wife, Michelle, and a couple of other men that I care about, and friends, and a mentor, and basically asked them a series. I'm forgetting the questions right now, but it was a series of 4 questions about how I'm doing, what I could be doing better. These kinds of
Mm,
questions, uh, and they were really honest and clear with their feedback, and I really appreciated that. And I think that's an exercise um, everybody should do on a fairly regular basis. Right?
mm.
And I found it to be really helpful. And I'd heard about it somewhere. I don't know if I was on a podcast or something. I'd heard about it, and I'm like, oh, I'm gonna try that.
Mm.
Yeah,
Yeah. Okay. I guess like so because as you know, I'm doing this men's group,
sure.
and part of the reason why I started it was because I was finding that there were challenges. I think everyone has relational challenges, um, but some of them were particularly related to being a man in this
Mm-hmm.
world or maybe this culture.
Mm-hmm.
Um, would you say that it's difficult to move away from maybe some of the more typical ideas about?
Yeah, I think there's kind of a thing happening now. Well, I think there's the obvious. We're living in or kind of a war, what gets called traditional masculinity or toxic masculinity or something like that, and it kind of comes out of these categories of masculinity like stoicism or dominance or
Mm,
these the kind of the standard masculine frameworks. And I think more recently, I'd say at least in the last decade, if not longer, well, probably longer, but I mean, it's become more widespread as this kind of more kind of enlightened masculinity in some ways. What often gets called woke, you know,
mm,
and and in that sometimes I think. And, well, first of all, the tradition, the stoicism or the dominance models of masculinity are often they're just too thin, right? Um, and I think people are kind of discovering that. Although I'm sure there's many men that align with them and subscribe to them,
mm,
um, and the kind of the more patriarchal ideas around masculinity. And then we've had this more kind of performative thing, um, which is this idea of like being men but trying not to do harm. but some ways not going far enough either, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
just not doing harm is not far enough, right? That
Mm-hmm.
you, I think there's a more opportunity for depth there, and if it's just that, then it can be kind of performative. And I think you've seen this recently. I'm thinking of one podcaster in particular who, um, you know, word came out about, and he was kind of the spokesperson for, that sort of masculinity, and it came out that he'd harmed women in the work that he had done and stuff like that. And so I think sometimes if it's that side could also be performative and not have a lot of depth to it either. So you get caught in this binary, and again, I'm like, how do we I don't know, not try to prescribe a particular masculinity, but then create the conditions for a richer masculinity that,
Mm-hmm.
that might include all kinds of different things.
Yeah.
Right?
You said doesn't go far enough. What is far enough?
Well, I mean, it's great to do no harm, um, but is there actually are you actually like being relationally reflective, and like,
Mm-hmm.
and are you being imaginative in how you're doing masculinity? Are you being innovative in how you're doing masculinity?
Mm-hmm.
Right? And are you not getting caught in a binary either? And there's lots of different ways I think it can go richer and deeper. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Are there any men in your life that you have been you particularly admire?
Yeah. I mean, yeah. I feel very fortunate to be here, California family, with the men that are here, and yes, my role is often as their supervisor, but I learn just as much from them as hopefully they might be learning from me. Um, so it's very nice to be in a group of men who are really interested in doing things differently and trying to support other men and more, I think value laden ways. I have a I have a mentor who's actually a spiritual teacher in my Zen Buddhist practice, who's an amazing man, somebody I look up to and aspire to be. And yeah, I'd say, yeah, I've been
Okay.
fortunate. Yeah.
Uh, if you were to point me in a direction and say you should talk to this person next and ask them this question, or do some people come to mind?
Yeah. Anybody here at CFI?
Okay. Right. Okay.
Keith, Danny, do an interview of yourself.
Okay. Um, so
Even that you're asking these questions, I think is great. I mean, so,
yeah. Okay. Well,
yeah.
trying to figure out how to answer the question, it feels really difficult. But
Yeah.
um, I think so. One of the challenges uh, I think that I've experienced is that it feels really easy to fall into like traps, I guess. Like, so for example, before I became interested in becoming a therapist, and I was just kind of interested in psychology in general, and I, had discovered like Jordan Peterson many, many years ago,
Mm.
and back when he was just talking about psychology. And I enjoyed watching some of his lectures and thought he seemed interesting and really um, a really great speaker. And then suddenly I found myself watching him like try to defend his views about women not wearing makeup in the workplace or something like. And I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
what? I don't know what I'm watching now. And so I suddenly felt like, okay, I'm now this person who I admired. I don't anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And then and then I think as I started to learn more and more about, or started to do more reading and learn about, different perspectives from like a social justice lens or social construction or postmodernism,
Mm-hmm.
all these things. And then I started realizing that a lot. I started to disagree with a lot of his takes
Mm-hmm.
on things, and
Mm-hmm.
so it felt like a lot of work though to get there. Um, and so yeah, I guess like how would you say you're supposed to move through the world if it feels like there's so many traps? I guess.
Big question. Yes, but it's a great question. And I think you had the experience I think many young men have today, right? Especially now with social media and all the messages we're bombarded with. I think men, especially young people, young men, are looking for purpose and meaning, right? And there's lots of people that'll, like you said, I think Jordan Peterson at the time probably, you know, had a purposeful, meaningful message for you at the time. And then, the thing that I think helped you, but then kind of swerved off into a thing. I saw, I never really followed him. I think I got introduced to him when he had, I think the anti-trans stuff or
Mm.
whatever, I think that's when he hit my radar. But um, there are lots of traps. And the problem is that then because people had, I think, masculinity, for me at least, one of the tenets of of masculinity for me is a humility, right? Which is a learning and an unlearning. And
Mm.
so you did some learning and then you did some unlearning when something didn't feel right for you. And I think one of the other kind of tenets for masculinity for me is this idea of care, right? Like I think men should be caring people and not just for their family or kids if they have them or something like that, that their circle of care should expand out to their family and then to their community and to, going on and on and on. And that's how I avoid traps. I have my own set of values that have grounded me in groundlessness. Um, and and then so when Jordan Peterson makes a left turn and says, I'm not going to acknowledge trans people or women and make whatever it is, and you could say, does that fit with my values? It does not. So this is where I hit. This is where I hit the
Mm.
eject button, right? And I think that's the problem is that fortunately you did, but I think young people, I think, feel like if I bought part of it, maybe this part I got to buy too, and I got to keep going with it.
Mm.
Um, and I think once again saying with the tenet of humility being a tenet of masculinity, I think men have a hard time changing their minds about things and saying maybe I was wrong about that before, and that's and I think that comes from some sort of dominant masculinity ideas or something like that, that changing your mind is a weakness when in reality for
Mm.
me it's a strength, right? And so but we just need more men in the world saying that, right? That like it's okay, Jordan Peterson, not all of his ideas are terrible. And I don't think you can say that either because some of his ideas aren't terrible, right?
Mm.
So they don't, so other people don't like that message either. But if we have more nuanced conversations about, yeah, some of his ideas, but then some of his ideas swerve off of like what I value as a man, and that being caring for the women in my life, or caring for the trans people in my life, caring
Mm.
for the and my circle of care expanding, and that is my role as a man, is part and parcel is care for my family, care for my community, care for my neighbors,
Mm.
if I know them or not. Um, and that guides me, right?
Mm. Mm. Yeah, I think I have been wrestling with this because I think part of one of my conclusions that I came to before I started this interview was that like you have to do some amount of like reading learning and unlearning.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think, but then I'm like, well, I particularly enjoy consuming philosophy podcasts and
Mm-hmm.
reading things that, history and,
Mm-hmm.
but like, I also am thinking about like someone who works 40 hours a week or maybe 60 hours a week. And they want to come home and like
Scroll.
relax and not have to like, I don't know, like, I don't know if it should be a requirement that every person is well educated on history or
Mm-hmm.
like on the um, different feminist movements.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I think as at first I was like, I think you should be educated on the feminist movements, but then I'm like, well, is that, you know, I don't know. What do you have? What is your answer to that question?
Uh, well, I'm pro. I think we're in the midst of an anti-intellectualism right now,
Mm.
and I am pro-intellectualism. I mean, I do. I mean, I think some ways, it gets characterized as elitist or something like that. But I'm pro. I'm, we're in the midst. And fascist kinds of movements are, I mean, who do they go after the first? They go after the books and the
Mm.
thinkers, right? I mean, I was in the Warsaw Museum in Poland recently, and before there were any concentration camps or anything, there was a picture in the museum and where the Nazis had rounded up all the philosophers and educators and stuff like that. Before they even rounded up anybody else, that's who they rounded up. And so, and people don't talk about that often. So it's those are the folks they go after first. The people that are gonna. Not everybody's going to be like an intellectual or a thinker, but they'll lean on thinkers. Just like Jordan Peterson has a big audience, right?
Mm.
And there's a reason for that, because people are looking for meaning. And so even when they have those long-term jobs, they'll still scroll on Jordan Peterson and pause for a minute and see what he has to say, right?
Mm.
I mean, that was apparent over the last several years, but so um, I think it's our responsibility to continue to read, to like research, to learn, and then to pass that knowledge on. And then I trust there is an audience for it, or that people will. I don't think everybody has to know the nuances of third wave feminism as opposed to what. But again, going back to care, they should care for the women in their lives, and in caring
Mm.
for the women in their lives, listen to what they say and what they need and what they hope for, and that's feminism, I guess.
Mm. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So, uh, given the pro-intellectual stance, what do you have 5 books that you would recommend that I read and maybe any other person should
And
read?
related to masculinity
Yeah.
and stuff like that. Yeah, yeah. So yes, I think Gender Not by Alan Johnson is a must read. I think Bell Hook's book on masculinity.
Mm.
Um, Forgetting the name of it. All About Love. I think it's a Will to Change.
Okay.
That's the name of the book. I wrote a note. Um, I like Mark Green's little Me Too #Me Too book for men. It's a easy read, and I think it's a really great book for men to read. I think I was thinking about this. In a book, I was thinking about like books that I would read, and books that popped up for me. A couple books that popped up for me were like anti-war books, like
Mm.
Slaughterhouse-Five, which is one of my favorite books ever, which is about fate, and it's an anti-war book, kind of with a science fiction bent, and about fate and will and death. And I think, and a book that was impactful on me as a young man was Johnny Got His Gun. It was kind of pre-World War II, post-World War I book by Dalton Trumbo. And because I still think there's this romanticism in masculinity around the warriorness, right?
Mhm.
And we're seeing it kind of play out. We're seeing the destruction play out in our contemporary world about some of these ideas, and I think we need to like demystify like warriorness or
Mhm.
whatever, right? And so I
Mhm.
think so. I was thinking about that. How do we, and these books are like, they tend to like masculinity, but also like care, care, going back to that theme, and just the insanity of war, right?
Mhm.
Um, so yeah, I was thinking about that.
Mhm.
How do we make men less aggressive and more peaceful?
Yeah.
And that doesn't mean still protectors, but yeah. Yeah.
Mhm. Okay. All right. Well, those are all my questions. Do you have
No, I appreciate
anything
the
else you'd like
opportunity to
to?
kind of think about these ideas. It's I'm not a doomsayer. I mean, masculinity is challenged currently, and I think being in this field, we see a lot of struggles men are having out in the world, and so it's challenging times. And I just hope we as men can meet it, and I think you're doing it with this, right? I was one of the other tenets, I think, is imagination or creativity, and here you are, I think, being creative and um, creating a different kind of message for men. So I appreciate that. So
Mhm.
thanks.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Yeah.